The snow in Hallow Creek came early that year, thick and steady, clinging to rooftops like memory that refused to melt. A deputy cruiser rolled down Main Street, its tires hissing through slush, the wipers ticking like a slow heartbeat. Behind the wheel sat Officer Logan Reed, jaw tight, hands locked on 10 and 2. Beside him, Elise, 10 years old, blind since the crash, sat silent, her gloved fingers curled around the handle of her white cane, face turned towards the window, though there was nothing to see. Outside, the Ridgeview Animal Shelter glowed faintly against the grey sky. Light spilled through frost-laced windows, warm and humming with life. Logan parked, engine still rumbling under his foot, and didn't move. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly. Elise nodded once. "I want to try." Her voice was calm. She'd practiced calm. Logan hesitated, then killed the engine. The silence that followed felt heavier than the storm. Inside, the smell of disinfectant, hay, and fur wrapped around them as they stepped into the lobby. A woman behind the desk, tall, mid-50s, wiry build with a soft voice, looked up and smiled. "You're early," she said, standing. "Logan Reed, right? And this must be Elise." "That's us," Logan replied, forcing a smile. "Thanks for seeing us last minute." The woman extended her hand. "I'm Marlene. Been here 20 years. Come on back. We've got a few dogs I think you'll like." They walked down a hallway lined with kennels, metal and concrete, softened by the occasional blanket or chew toy. Dogs barked and whined on either side, some leaping at the bars, others pacing. Elise held her cane in one hand, the other gently brushing the back of her father's coat. She didn't flinch at the noise. She listened. "This guy lost his home last month," Marlene said, tapping a kennel. "Sweet temperament. This girl over here, rescued off the highway, still skittish but good bones. That one loves kids." Elise paused near one of the cages. "That dog's tail is wagging." Marlene blinked. "That's right. You've got good ears, hun." Elise knelt, reaching her hand gently towards the bars. A golden retriever licked her fingers eagerly. She smiled but didn't stay long. They kept walking. The barking began to fade. The hallway darkened slightly. A flickering overhead bulb buzzed faintly. Then Elise stopped. "This one's quiet," she said, tilting her head. Logan glanced up. Cage 12. It sat alone at the far end of the hall, recessed into shadow. The dog inside didn't move. A large German shepherd, his coat matted, scar running down one shoulder like an old battle line. His head rested on his paws, his eyes barely opened. But they were open. Marlene hesitated. "That's Ranger," she said, her voice lower now. "Former K9, Nebraska. Served 5 years, lost his handler in a meth house raid. Hasn't made a sound since they pulled him off the body." Elise took a small step closer. Her cane tapped once against the floor. "He doesn't bark?" she asked. "No," Marlene said. "Won't eat unless the lights are off. Won't let anyone touch him. We think he's waiting for his partner." Logan shifted uneasily. "He's not dangerous, right?" Marlene shook her head. "Not aggressive, just gone, like something inside switched off." Elise moved forward. "What was his partner's name?" Marlene blinked. "Tom Avery. They called him Ranger and Tom. They were inseparable." Logan crouched beside his daughter. "Sweetheart, let's look at the others. There are plenty of good dogs here." But Elise didn't move. Her cane dropped lightly to the floor as she reached out with her free hand. "Hi," she whispered. "It's okay. You don't have to be afraid." For a moment, nothing. No twitch, no breath. Then, barely perceptible, the German shepherd's ears flicked. His head lifted, slow and unsure, like a soldier waking from a long sleep. He looked at her. Marlene's breath caught. "That's the first time he's done that," she murmured. Since he got here?" Elise didn't smile. She waited. The dog rose, joints stiff, muscles cautious. He stepped once, then again, his body low, but eyes locked on the girl. He reached the bars, paused, then pressed his nose gently to her fingertips. Elise let out a small gasp, not from fear but surprise. Warm breath, a soft exhale. Her hand trembled. Then, so soft it was almost imagined, his tail moved. Just once. Logan stood frozen, the air tight in his lungs. Something shifted inside him, something he hadn't felt in months. Not hope, not yet, but something near it. Marlene spoke quietly. "We usually don't let volunteers near him, but I think you're not just anyone." Elise turned slightly, her face glowing in the half-light. "I want him," she said. Logan blinked. "Elise, he didn't bark because he's not trying to scare anyone. He's tired," she said. "Just like you used to be." Her voice wasn't a plea. It was a fact. Delivered gently, but without room for argument. Marlene looked at Logan. "We can do a 30-day foster, no pressure. If it doesn't work, we try again." Logan glanced between the dog and his daughter, two broken things reaching across silence. He exhaled. "Okay," he said softly. "We'll try." Ranger didn't move, but his eyes stayed on Elise, and his tail, just once, brushed the floor again, like a quiet agreement between wounded souls. Outside, the snow kept falling, but inside, something had changed. Not loud, not bright, but real, and still breathing. Ranger didn't bark when they brought him home. He didn't whine, sniff the furniture, or even look around. He stepped across the threshold of the Reed house like a ghost, crossing into a place he didn't expect to leave. Elise held the leash gently, walking just ahead with her cane, folded in her hand. Her steps were sure, even on the slick hardwood floor. Ranger followed behind her, not because of the leash, but because he chose to. Logan watched from the doorway, coat still on, his fingers lingering near the badge at his belt like it might anchor him. The house felt colder somehow, not in temperature, but in presence. The kind of cold that seeps in when silence isn't peaceful, it's heavy. "You okay, sweetheart?" he asked. "I'm fine," Elise said softly. She reached down and patted the air until she found Ranger's shoulder. "He's calm." Ranger didn't react to the touch, but he didn't flinch either. Just stood there, still as a shadow. They set up a bed for him in the corner of the living room near the fireplace. A soft pad, a blanket, a bowl of water. Logan dropped the bag of kibble next to it and stood back. "He'll probably take a while to eat," said Marlene, who'd followed them in briefly to go over the foster details. "He's used to eating at night. Sometimes not at all." Logan nodded. Elise crouched next to Ranger, her hand on his chest. "I think he's listening," she whispered. Marlene's expression softened. "That might be more than he's done in months." She didn't stay long. When she left, the house fell into that old quiet again, the kind that made Logan grind his teeth. It had been too quiet since the accident. No music, no laughter, no late-night TV, just clocks and breathing. That night, Elise insisted on sleeping downstairs with Ranger. Logan tried to argue, but she'd already set a sleeping bag beside his bed. "Just tonight," she said. "He shouldn't wake up alone again." Logan didn't have a reply for that. He left the hall light on. Around 2 a.m., he woke to the sound of low growling. He grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand and came downstairs fast, heart thudding. Ranger was pacing the living room, hackles raised, teeth bared, but not at Elise. At the window. Logan froze. The storm had picked up. Wind rattled the glass, and tree branches scraped against the side of the house like nails on a chalkboard. A trash bin across the street had tipped over, spilling its contents in a pattern that, under moonlight, looked like movement. Ranger stood between Elise and the window, planted, growling deep and low. Logan stepped forward slowly. "Easy, boy," he said, voice steady. "Just the wind." Ranger's ears twitched. He glanced back at Logan. Then, after a few seconds, lowered his head. The growl faded. Elise stirred, pulling the sleeping bag tighter around her. "He's okay," she murmured. "He just thought I needed protecting." Logan stood there for a while, flashlight in hand, watching the dog settle back down. Elise reached toward Ranger, eyes closed, and laid her hand gently on his fur. The growling stopped completely. By morning, the trash was still scattered outside. Nothing had come close, but the carpet near the window held deep claw marks. Ranger had stood his ground. The next few days were a mixture of tension and tenderness. Logan worked patrol shifts while Elise stayed home with a family friend who came by. Each evening, when he returned, he'd find Elise at the piano, fingers dancing clumsily over the keys. It had been Claire's piano, his late wife's, untouched since the accident. Now Elise sat there every day trying to remember the notes. She couldn't read music anymore, but she played by memory, by instinct. Ranger lay under the bench, head resting on her feet. Sometimes she'd press a single note over and over again until it sounded like it belonged. And always, Ranger would stay perfectly still, breathing in time with the melody. "He doesn't like loud things," she said once. "How do you know?" Logan asked. "I can feel it," she replied. One evening, Logan came home earlier than usual and found Elise sitting on the rug, her hand resting flat against Ranger's chest. She wasn't talking, just listening. "His heart beat," she said, not looking up. "It's slow but strong." Logan watched her, unsure what to say. He had never really believed in spiritual things, but this didn't feel like training or coincidence. It felt old, like something carved into bone. "He still flinches at doors slamming," Logan said after a while. "But he doesn't do that with you." "He knows I don't see the doors," Elise replied simply. That night, Logan sat alone at the kitchen table after Elise went to bed. Ranger had followed her up, lying beside her bed like a sentinel. The house was quiet, but no longer empty. There was a weight now, but not the same one that had haunted him. This one had shape, purpose. He pulled out an old photo from his wallet. Claire, smiling at a lake. Elise was just a toddler in her arms. He touched the edge of the photo, then turned towards the ceiling. "I don't know what you sent us," he whispered, "but I think he might be more than a dog." Upstairs, Elise whispered into the dark. "Good night, Ranger." A quiet breath, then a soft sound, the brush of a tail against the wood floor. She smiled and pressed her fingers to his chest again. She couldn't see him, but she felt everything. The call came just after dawn. Logan stood in the kitchen, pouring coffee into a chipped mug, when the dispatch crackled through his radio. "Unit 3, we've got another 1016. Same pattern. No forced entry. Resident claims missing cash, back door slightly open. Location, 184 Sycamore." He grabbed his jacket from the hook by the door, slipping his badge into the inside pocket. Upstairs, Elise was still asleep, her breathing soft through the baby monitor he refused to stop using. Ranger lay curled beside her bed. "I'll be back before lunch," Logan whispered. Ranger opened one eye. He didn't move, but Logan could swear there was something behind that amber stare, like the dog already knew what kind of morning it would be. At Sycamore Street, the snow was untouched except for a single trail of boot prints. Logan followed them around the back of the house, noting the angle, the size. Then he stopped. The prints ended 10 feet into the backyard. No drag, no jump, no turn. Just ended. He crouched, staring at the last footprint, the way the snow dipped perfectly beneath the weight of it. His breath fogged in the air. Who walks into a yard and disappears? The homeowner, a nervous man in his 40s, said nothing was taken except $200 in cash and a laptop. No broken locks, no glass, no barking from his golden retriever. It was the third time this had happened in 3 weeks. Back at the precinct, Logan pinched the bridge of his nose and stared at the map on the wall. 3 houses. Same pattern. The only common thread was the location. Quiet blocks, minimal visibility, no security cameras, and no witnesses. That afternoon, he picked Elise up from school. She climbed into the front seat without needing help. Ranger rode in the back, head out the window, wind rushing through his fur. "Any action today?" she asked, the way she always did now. "Just puzzles," Logan muttered. "Things that don't add up." Elise tilted her face toward the sun. "You should ask Ranger." He raised an eyebrow. "You think he can solve crimes now? He notices things," she said. "Better than people." Logan didn't answer. But when they pulled into the driveway, he caught Ranger staring down the street, ears perked, not toward anything specific, just listening. That night, Elise sat by the fireplace with her fingers on the piano keys, not playing, just resting. Ranger lay beside her, breathing slow and deep. "I had the dream again," she whispered. Logan looked up from his laptop. "What dream?" "The one where Mom is in the kitchen, not how she was at the hospital. She's warm. She's laughing." Logan closed the screen. She turns around and the room fills with yellow light. Not like sunlight, like something brighter. He didn't know what to say. "She always says the same thing," Elise continued. "She says, 'Don't be afraid, I found someone to help.' And then Ranger walks in." Logan swallowed. "You think Mom sent him?" "I don't think," Elise said. "I feel it." Ranger stirred. He moved closer to her, resting his head on her foot. Logan watched the two of them, and the ache in his chest tightened. There were nights when he still dreamed of twisted metal, of sirens and blood, and her voice calling his name. He hadn't told Elise that he was the one driving, that he missed the turn, that her mother had screamed before everything went black. Some truths are too heavy to pass down. And yet, looking at his daughter now, a small hand resting gently on the dog's head, he wondered if she didn't already know. Elise didn't talk to Ranger like a pet. She spoke to him like an old friend. They didn't use words much anymore. She'd sit on the porch, humming, and he'd hum with her, his breathing syncing with her songs. She'd walk the hallway and he'd match her pace, never letting her brush a wall or knock into a chair. One morning, Logan found them curled together under a blanket on the couch. Elise asleep. Ranger wide awake, staring at the door like he was guarding the gates of heaven. Later that week, another break-in. Logan arrived minutes after dispatch. No signs of forced entry. Cash gone. Same clean footprints. This time they stopped in a field behind the house, mid-stride. Then nothing. He knelt, snow crunching under his boots, staring at the final indentation. A shiver ran up his spine. Back home, Elise was sitting cross-legged on the floor, her hand on Ranger's chest again. "You smell like worry," she said. Logan gave a tired chuckle. "I probably do. I think Ranger knows something," she said. "Something you haven't seen yet." Ranger lifted his head at her voice. His ears twitched once, then settled. That night, as Logan reviewed the case files, Elise came into his office in her pajamas, hair tousled, the silver pendant around her neck catching the lamplight. "You believe in signs, Daddy?" He didn't answer right away. "Like what kind of signs?" like dogs in cage number 12 who don't move until someone blind reaches for them, she said. Like dreams with yellow light, like how Ranger never lets go of me, not even when I cry. Logan looked at her. She placed her hand over his heart. You stopped listening to your heart after she died, she said softly. But maybe Ranger didn't. The room was quiet. The storm outside had quieted to a hush. Logan turned back to the window, snowflakes catching in the amber glow of the porch light. In the reflection, he saw Elise standing next to Ranger, one small girl, one broken dog, and somehow both looked whole. The rain came like war that night, hard and sudden, slashing against the windows of the Reed home, turning the street into a river of shadows. The wind howled through the pine trees, and thunder cracked like bone splitting in the sky. Inside, the house was dim and quiet. Logan was on patrol, working a double shift due to a domestic call that had run long. Elise had fallen asleep on the couch, curled under a blanket. Ranger nestled beside her, his head resting gently on her lap. He hadn't moved in an hour, but when the floorboard near the back door creaked, a sound no wind could make, his eyes opened. Not wide, not fast, just sharp, present. He lifted his head. A second creak. Then the handle turned. Ranger rose. The door opened slowly. Rain spilled in. And then a figure stepped into the house, soaked through, tall and wiry, clothes clinging like a second skin. Earl Danner. He moved with a quietness that didn't match his size, boots leaving mud and rainwater in a broken trail across the hardwood. His ram face was lean, jaw twitching with tension. His right hand held a hunting knife low and loose, the kind of grip that knew how to use it. His eyes scanned the room and landed on the photos above the fireplace. One of them showed Logan in uniform, holding a small, blonde-haired girl in his arms. The girl wore a badge pinned to her sweater. Danner's jaw clenched. Cop's daughter, he muttered under his breath. Poetic. He took one step further. And then Ranger stepped into the hallway. They locked eyes. Thought he put you down, Danner said coldly. Guess not. Ranger didn't bark. He didn't growl. He just stood there, still, coiled, alive. Danner raised the knife slightly. Move! Ranger didn't. Then, without a sound, he lunged. The collision was a blur. Fur and steel, grunts and snarls. The knife slashed through the air, slicing Ranger's side. The dog yelped but didn't stop. He sank his teeth into Danner's arm, dragging him sideways into the coat rack, knocking it over with a crash. Upstairs, Elise bolted upright. She couldn't see, but she could hear. The sound of the struggle was chaos. A chair crashing, a low human curse, the scrape of boots against the floor, a growl, deep and furious. Then the unmistakable sound of something heavy slamming into the wall. Ranger, she screamed. No answer, just thunder outside. She reached for her cane, fumbling through the dark. Downstairs, blood slicked the tiles near the back door. Danner staggered back, cradling his arm, eyes wild. He kicked hard, catching Ranger in the ribs. The dog slid against the wall but sprang back, limping now, one leg barely touching the floor. You don't quit, do you? Danner hissed. Ranger growled, a sound not of anger but warning. Danner turned toward the stairs. Elise's voice had given her away. You make me bleed, he said, spitting onto the floor. I'll make sure she screams. He moved. Ranger did too. The knife came first. It caught Ranger just above the shoulder. A deep, tearing cut. Blood flowed fast and dark. But the dog didn't stop. He hit Danner full force, knocking him off balance, jaws locking around the man's forearm. They fell together. Ranger's body bore the weight of pain and fury, muscle and instinct. Danner screamed, slamming his fist into Ranger's side again and again. The dog whimpered, but didn't release. Elise reached the top of the stairs, breath ragged, blind to the violence but hearing every second. "Ranger!" she cried. That name, spoken in fear, in trust, cut through everything. Ranger released the bite. Not because he was finished, but because he knew. Dana rolled, scrambled for the knife, grabbed it, and fled, through the open door into the storm. The sound of his boots vanished into the hiss of rain. Downstairs, Ranger stood trembling, blood dripping from his side, his front leg barely holding weight. He turned toward the stairs. "Ranger," Elise whispered. He limped forward, step by broken step, until he reached her feet. He leaned his body against her legs. Her hands found his fur, warm and wet with blood. She sank to the floor, wrapping her arms around him. "You stayed," she said, voice shaking. "You didn't leave me." His breathing was shallow, pain visible in every twitch, but he didn't move away. He stayed. Rain pounded the house like it wanted to get in. Wind tore at the shutters. Elise reached for the phone but couldn't find it. She stayed where she was, holding him, whispering into his ear. "I'm here. I'm right here." Ranger closed his eyes. One breath, then another, still with her. Outside, Dana disappeared into the dark. Inside, under the hum of the storm, the girl and the dog sat bleeding, one from skin, one from fear, but neither alone, and neither broken. Not yet. Not together. The house still smelled like rain and blood. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving Hallow Creek quiet beneath a cold, grey sky. But inside the Reed home, the storm hadn't ended. It had simply changed form. Ranger lay on a blanket in the living room, stitched and sedated. Dr. Keller, the town's traveling vet, had come at sunrise. He worked quietly, eyes grim, and didn't charge a dime. "This dog saved your kid's life," he said, wiping blood from his hands. "That's more than most people could have done." Logan hadn't answered. He sat at the table with his head in his hands, still wearing the same clothes from the night before. Dried mud crusted his boots. A rip in his sleeve showed where glass had caught him when he ran through the broken back door. He hadn't even felt it. Now the weight of it all pressed down, harder than the knife, harder than the rain. Elise sat on the couch, knees tucked to her chest, a blanket over her shoulders. Her hand never left Ranger's side. She hadn't cried, not once. But her silence was louder than anything else in the room. "You should have told me someone like him could come," she said finally, voice flat. Logan looked up slowly. "I didn't think—" "No, you didn't," she interrupted, still calm. "You didn't think he'd find us, or that he'd remember." Logan flinched. "He almost killed you," he said, voice hoarse. "I'm the one who put him away, and now he's back for revenge. Because of me." She shook her head. "No, because of who he is." He stood abruptly, chair screeching back. "I can't protect you from everything, Elise, but I can control this. Ranger's a good dog, but he's dangerous. He bit a man. He nearly died. And if that man comes back—" "He won't!" she said sharply. Logan froze. Elise stood now, trembling but firm. "You're scared. I get it. But don't use that to take him away." His voice cracked. "Sweetheart, I can't lose you. Not after what happened to your mum. I can't do this again." Tears welled in his eyes, and for the first time in years, they fell. "I wake up every night to the sound of tires skidding. I see her face in the rearview mirror. I should have taken the other road. I should have—" "You didn't kill her," Elise said quietly. "I was driving. I was there," she replied. "So was Mum. It wasn't your fault." Logan sat down again, hands shaking. "She told me to take care of you," he whispered. Her last words, I heard them through the glass. There was a long silence. Then Elise took a step forward. "Then listen to me now," she said softly. You want to protect me? Don't take away the only thing that makes me feel safe. She knelt beside Ranger, placing a hand over his chest. His breathing was shallow but steady. He didn't run when Dana came, she said. He bled for me. Logan looked at her, really looked, and saw not just a child, but someone who'd carried the weight of grief without ever asking to. She wasn't asking now. She was standing her ground. He wanted to argue, but he couldn't. The knock came 15 minutes later. Carl Dawson stood at the door, eyes bleary but alert. We got something, he said, holding up a sealed evidence bag. Inside was a swab, dark red at the tip. Blood, Carl said. We found it outside your fence, traced it all the way up Sycamore. Logan stiffened. It's Dana? Confirmed. Carl nodded. We ran the sample, matched to his prison medical file. And here's the kicker. Same blood found at the first 2 break-ins. He's been casing the neighborhood for weeks. Logan swore under his breath. He's still here. We think so, Carl said. Tracking dogs picked up the scent to an old hunting cabin near Black Ridge. We're setting up a team. You want in? Logan looked back inside. Elise had returned to the couch, hand still on Ranger. I'll be there, he said quietly. Carl nodded and turned to leave. Before shutting the door, Logan turned back one last time to his daughter. You were right, he said. He didn't choose us by accident. And Elise, her face calm but shining with tears, replied, He chose us because we needed him, just like he needed us. Outside the snow began to fall again, quiet, steady. But this time it didn't feel cold. It felt like purpose. The rain returned with a vengeance. Hallow Creek disappeared under sheets of water and shadow. The roads were slick, the trees bent sideways in the wind. Red and blue lights flared behind Logan's cruiser, slicing through the storm as he tore down the gravel road toward Black Ridge. He's up there. Carl's voice echoed through the radio. Tracking team spotted movement near the old Halverson cabin. Be careful, he's armed. Logan didn't answer. His hands gripped the wheel tighter. In his chest, something raw and urgent pulsed. More than duty. This wasn't just another suspect. This was a man who had stepped into his home. A man who had made his daughter afraid again. He wouldn't get a second chance. The road curved, then opened into a clearing. Logan slammed the brakes. The cruiser skidded to a stop, mud flying up in bursts. In front of him, the cabin stood silent beneath the pounding rain. Windows boarded, smoke curling faintly from the chimney. Logan stepped out, rain slamming into him like cold fists. His boots sank into the mud. Hand on his weapon. Every sense sharpened. Movement behind the porch railing. He raised his voice. Dana, step out, now! Silence. Then the door creaked. Earl Dana emerged, soaked and wild-eyed. The gash on his arm was bandaged poorly, blood still seeping through. In his hand, a hunting knife, gleaming even in the dim light. Well, well, he said, voice calm, almost amused. The hero shows up. Logan didn't flinch. Drop the knife. Dana smiled. You gonna shoot me, cop? In the rain? After all the paperwork you'll have to do? I'll live. Dana took a step forward. You think I came back just to scare you? He hissed. You locked me up for 8 years. You think a dog's gonna undo that? No, Logan said. But that dog stopped you once, and I'll stop you again. Lightning cracked overhead. Dana moved fast. Too fast. He lunged, knife low, straight toward Logan's side. Logan fired. The shot missed. They collided, bodies slamming into each other, crashing to the ground in a tangle of limbs and fury. The knife sliced across Logan's forearm. He shouted, grabbing Dana's wrist, twisting hard. Dana grunted but didn't let go. He slammed his elbow into Logan's ribs. Logan's breath exploded from his chest. They rolled, boots scraping mud, hands grappling for control. The knife hovered inches from Logan's face. Then he headbutted Dana hard. The man reeled. Logan kicked the knife aside. They came to their feet. Fists now. Dana struck first, hook to the jaw. Logan staggered. Blood filled his mouth. He spit it out and drove a punch into Dana's gut, then another to the ribs. Dana dropped to his knees. Logan cuffed him, breathing hard. His arms ached. Rain poured into his eyes. "You're done," he panted. Dana spat mud. "You think this means you win?" "I don't care about winning," Logan said. "I care about going home." Headlights approached through the trees. Carl's cruiser. Back up. By the time they loaded Dana into the car, Logan's shirt was torn, his arm wrapped in gauze. Carl eyed him. "You good?" Logan nodded once. "Yeah." "You sure?" Logan hesitated, then pulled out his phone and hit a number on speed dial. It rang twice. Then Elise's voice answered, small but steady. "Daddy?" "Hey, sweetheart, I'm okay." In the background, he heard the soft whine of Ranger. The sound hit him like a tidal wave. "I'm coming home." He ended the call, leaned against the car, and looked up into the storm. Later, just past midnight, Logan stepped through the front door. The house was dim, the fire low. The scent of antiseptic and old blankets lingered. On the couch, Elise was fast asleep, curled into Ranger's side. Her hand rested gently on his bandaged chest. The dog's eyes opened when Logan entered, but he didn't move. He just watched. Logan stood there a long time, dripping rain, watching them breathe. Then he pulled out his phone again. Called Carl. The line picked up quick. "Didn't think you'd call back this late." Logan's voice was low. "I didn't just find Dana tonight," he said. "I found something else." Carl waited. "I found my way back." He ended the call. Outside, the rain began to ease, tapering into silence. Inside, Logan walked over, knelt beside Ranger, and pressed a hand gently to the dog's neck. "You did good, partner." Ranger didn't bark, but his tail tapped once against the floor. A heartbeat. A salute. The courtroom was silent except for the steady tick of the old wall clock. Logan sat 2 rows back, in uniform, arm still stiff in its sling. His face was unreadable, eyes trained on the man standing in front of the judge. Earl Dana, shackled and hollow-eyed. For assault with a deadly weapon, felony breaking and entering, and obstruction of justice. The judge intoned, voice echoing through the chamber. "This court sentences you to 12 years without the possibility of parole." No protest came from Dana, no apology either. He stood still as stone, jaw locked, eyes distant. Logan didn't need his remorse. He only needed the door to close behind him. When the gavel struck, Logan stood, walked out into the cold light of morning, and exhaled for the first time in days. Justice, clean and final. But real healing was happening somewhere else. At Ridgeview Animal Clinic, tucked between a pine-lined road and the edge of town, Elise Reed sat cross-legged on a thick plaid blanket, Ranger's giant head resting in her lap. He was still healing, bandages clean, stitches neat. But his breathing was calm now, and his eyes, once dulled by fear, followed her every movement. She read to him every afternoon, sometimes poems, sometimes simple stories. Her fingers traced over the embossed braille on the pages, voice steady and soft. Today she brought her mother's favorite book, a collection of mountain fables. "You want to hear the one about the snow fox again?" she asked, tilting her head as if listening for an answer. Ranger huffed gently, one ear flicking. She smiled. "That's what I thought." Outside, the wind rustled dry leaves. Inside, the room felt warm and full. She read until her voice grew hoarse, then folded the book in her lap. Her hand moved instinctively to his chest, where his heart beat slow and strong beneath her palm. "You don't have to bark," she whispered. "You don't have to move." Ranger blinked, watching her face. "I know you're here. I always know." Dr. Keller watched from the hallway, arms crossed. The old vet hadn't said much the first few days, just tended to the wounds, adjusted medications. But now, every time Elise came, he found a reason to stay nearby. "Never seen anything like it," he muttered to Logan one evening. "That dog should be a wreck. Instead, he heals like he's got something to live for." Logan had nodded quietly. "She is something to live for." Ranger began standing again by the end of the week, moving slowly but with purpose. Elise didn't cheer or clap. She just pressed her forehead gently to his. "You're strong, Ranger, but not just because of your body." She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Sometimes I dream about light, you know. Bright and warm, like sunshine through the window. I can't see it, not really, but I feel it." Her hand moved to his fur again. "And when I feel you, it's like that." Ranger let out a low, contented breath and closed his eyes. Elise stayed a little longer, sitting in silence with him. Later that night, as Logan drove her home, Elise rested her head against the passenger window. "Do you think Mom knows?" she asked. Logan glanced at her. "Knows what?" "That I'm not scared anymore, that I found someone who helps me see the world." He didn't answer right away, just kept his eyes on the road ahead, the pine trees swaying gently in the wind. "I think she knows," he said finally. "I think she sent him to remind us." Elise smiled faintly, her fingers still smelling of antiseptic and fur. "She doesn't have to remind me. I already see it." Logan blinked, confused. "See what?" She turned her face toward him, the moonlight brushing her features. "Ranger," she said simply, "I don't see him with my eyes. I see him with my heart." And for the first time, Logan didn't feel the urge to correct her, because somehow that was more than enough. The snow had returned to Hallow Creek, but this time it fell like a benediction. Soft, gentle, forgiving. It blanketed the rooftops and gathered in slow drifts along the edge of the porch, where a pair of boots sat untouched and a well-worn red scarf fluttered faintly in the mountain breeze. Elise Reed sat wrapped in a thick quilt, her legs tucked beneath her on the wooden swing. The hem of her coat brushed against the weathered floorboards, her head tilted upward, face turned toward the pale sky. She was humming something quiet, wordless, a tune her mother used to sing when the world grew still. Beside her, Ranger lay curled in his usual spot, his head resting on her lap. He was older now. The scar across his shoulder had faded, but time had left its marks elsewhere. A touch of grey around the muzzle, slower movements, deeper sleep. Yet his eyes remained the same, sharp, loyal, endlessly watchful. Elise's fingers moved gently through his fur, tracing the curve of his neck in slow, familiar strokes. She didn't need sight to feel how the weight of him settled into her bones like comfort, like truth. "You're still my shadow," she whispered, voice light as breath. "Even if we don't run much anymore." Ranger huffed softly, a sound somewhere between a sigh and agreement. Inside, the smell of coffee and pine wood drifted through the cracked open door. Logan sat at the kitchen table, hunched slightly over his notebook. His handwriting, though still rough, had found rhythm again. The lines were steadier now, the ink darker. He paused, listening to the hum from outside, and wrote slowly, "She can't see the light, but she has become the light of my life." He sat back, closed the notebook, and stared out the window. A year had passed. A whole year since the storm, the break-in, the night that had almost cost him everything. The guilt, once so loud it drowned out his thoughts, had grown quiet. Not gone, but folded into something gentler. A scar, not a wound. He watched his daughter stroke the dog's ears, her smile soft and unhurried. She'd grown in that year. Not taller, maybe, but deeper, like the roots of the trees around them. More certain in her steps, more graceful in the way she moved through the world, as if each moment was a note in the song she carried. He stood, walked outside, and sat on the edge of the porch beside her. Elise turned toward the sound of his boots and grinned. "Hi, Daddy." "Morning, sweetheart," he said, rubbing Ranger's flank. "Cozy out here." "The coziest," she replied. "He's warm like a fire." Logan chuckled. "That's because he's been stealing my blanket again." Ranger let out a slow snort, clearly unbothered by the accusation. They sat in silence for a while. Below them, the town was quiet. Just the occasional crunch of boots on snow, the sound of someone chopping wood down the street, the hum of a distant snowplow carving a path through the hills. Elise lifted her face toward the wind. "I had another dream last night." Logan glanced at her. "The one with the yellow light?" he asked. She nodded. "But this time I wasn't standing still in the dark. I was walking through it, and Ranger was beside me." He said nothing, only reached for her hand. "And Mum was there," she added softly. "Not like a person, more like the light itself. Warm and safe." Logan squeezed her fingers. "Maybe she's always been there." Elise smiled. "I think so. Maybe she sent Ranger to us so we wouldn't forget." Ranger shifted slightly, letting out a slow groan as he stretched his front legs. Elise giggled and scratched behind his ears. "Lazy old boy," she teased. "But you still listen better than anyone." Logan leaned his elbows on his knees. "You two are quite the team." "We are," she said proudly. "He doesn't need to bark to protect me. I always know he's there." Her words lingered in the cold air like steam from a mug. From down the street came the faint sound of children laughing, sleds scraping across icy paths, a dog barking in the distance. "Things feel okay now," Elise murmured. Logan nodded slowly. "They do?" The sun began to peek over the ridgeline, casting gold across the snow. It shimmered in the air, catching on the frost that clung to the pine trees and painting the porch in soft light. Logan glanced at his daughter again, then down at the dog who had saved her. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to think heroes barked or wore badges or saved people in big ways. And now?" she asked. "Now I think some heroes just stay," he said. "They don't leave, even when it's hard." Ranger lifted his head slightly, eyes meeting Logan's. Then slow and steady, his tail thumped once against the porch. A quiet answer. A promise kept. The wind swept through the porch again, cold but clean, brushing Elise's hair back from her face. She leaned into her father's side, and for a long time, no one spoke. There was nothing left to say. Everything they needed was already there, humming in the wood beneath their feet, glowing in the snow, breathing beside them in the shape of an old dog whose heart had never stopped guarding what mattered most. Spring came early to Hallow Creek that year. The snow melted with a kindness it hadn't shown in seasons past, and the streets bloomed with color. Bunting strung between lamp posts, paper lanterns bobbing above storefronts, and hand-painted signs that read, "Hope Day Parade, honoring courage in all its forms." The town square overflowed with people. Children clutched balloons, veterans in dress uniform lined the sidewalks. The mayor stood at the temporary stage near the courthouse, adjusting his microphone beneath a banner stitched in navy and gold. "Heroes of Hope." Elise Reed waited near the front of the parade line, holding Ranger's leash loosely in one hand, her other hand gently resting on his back. She wore a pale blue dress and a white denim jacket, her hair tied back with a ribbon the color of the sky. Around her neck hung a small pendant engraved with the words, "Love sees beyond sight." Ranger sat calmly beside her. His coat gleamed in the morning sun, and though he moved slower these days, there was something regal in his posture. His eyes, sharp and steady, scanned the crowd not out of fear, but out of duty. Even here, in peace, he was guarding something precious. When the band struck its first note, Elise took the lead. The drum beat echoed down Main Street as she stepped forward with Ranger at her side. The crowd erupted in cheers. From behind them, Officer Logan Reed followed, his uniform pressed, his badge gleaming. His eyes never left his daughter. Whispers followed them like a breeze. "That's her, the blind girl who stopped the break-in. And that's the dog. He saved her. They said he was too broken. Guess they were wrong." Elise didn't hear the words, but she felt them. The warmth, the awe. Ranger walked beside her like a soldier on sacred ground, his pace matching hers perfectly, tail steady, head high. He didn't bark. He didn't need to. He had become a symbol. When they reached the stage, Mayor Carolyn Foster stepped forward. A stout woman with snow-white hair and a voice as firm as a preacher's, she lifted the microphone and smiled. "Citizens of Hallow Creek, today we honor not just bravery, but restoration." She turned toward Elise and Logan. 1 year ago, this family faced the storm. Not just the one that battered our rooftops, but the kind that batters the soul. They didn't run from it. They walked through it. And because they did, we all found something worth remembering. The crowd hushed. Courage is not loud. It doesn't always wear a badge or bark or bite. Sometimes it sings at dusk on a front porch. Sometimes it lies quietly at a girl's feet. Today we honor Elise Reed, Officer Logan Reed, and Ranger, our heroes of hope. Thunderous applause. Elise stepped forward. She couldn't see the hands clapping, but she could feel their energy, bright and full. She smiled, brushing her fingers along Ranger's collar, and whispered something only he could hear. "You're doing great, buddy." Logan took the mic next, pausing for a moment before speaking. "My daughter didn't just find a pet," he said, voice low but certain. "She found purpose. And Ranger, he didn't just find a home, he found someone who reminded him he was never really lost." The applause came again, not just louder, but deeper. As they stepped down from the stage, an older man approached. It was Carl Patterson, the former assistant from Ridgeview Shelter, the one who had helped care for the dogs, but also the one who had once said, "Cage 12's just wasting space." He looked at Ranger now, with something closer to reverence than regret. "I was wrong," he said simply, his voice tight. "I didn't believe in second chances. But this dog, this girl, they made me believe again." Logan extended a hand. Carl took it. "I heard about the therapy dog fund." Carl added, reaching into his coat pocket and pressing a check into Logan's palm. "For other kids. For other dogs like him. I want to help." Elise turned her head toward the voice. "Thank you, Mr. Patterson." "No, sweetheart," Carl said quietly. "Thank you." Later that day, Elise and Ranger sat on a bench near the edge of Town Square, watching the last of the parade fade into music and laughter. Dozens of kids had come to pet Ranger. Some had sat and asked Elise questions about what it was like to be blind, to be brave. She answered them with grace. One girl had even said, "I wish I was like you." And Elise had smiled. "You are. You just haven't met your Ranger yet." Logan watched her from a distance, arms folded, heart full. She wasn't just his daughter anymore. She had become something more. a symbol. Spark, a legacy. And Ranger, old, quiet, watchful, lay by her feet as if carved from the very ground he protected. The parade continued, but for Logan, this was the moment that mattered most. No flashing lights, no sirens, just his daughter, her dog, and a future that no longer felt like a burden. As the band played its final song, he whispered under his breath, "She gave him faith, and he gave us back the light." The afternoon sun poured down soft and amber over the hills of Hallow Creek. A breeze stirred the tall grass beside the Ridgeview Animal Shelter, where the wooden sign out front had been freshly painted. A smaller plaque had been added underneath. Ranger's Corner for the ones who wait. Inside the shelter, the air was calm. No barking, no clamor, just the occasional shuffle of paws and the warm murmur of voices. The hallway was lined with clean kennels and new tiles, but one thing hadn't changed. Cage 12 remained, now permanently open, its metal bars polished but untouched. It was no longer a cage, it was a monument. That afternoon, a small school bus rumbled up the drive and parked near the front gate. The door creaked open, and a dozen elementary students filed out in bright jackets and scuffed sneakers. Their voices carried excitement, but a touch of reverence too. Logan Reed stood by the front door, arms crossed, watching with a faint smile. His badge was no longer on his chest. It had been retired, resting now in a drawer at home. But his posture still held the quiet command of a man who had once known how to protect a town, and had learned how to protect something even smaller and more sacred. His daughter stood next to him. Elise, now 11, held a clipboard and a storybook. Her fingers ran gently across the braille lettering as she guided the students into the corridor. She moved with the confidence of someone who had grown into herself, not despite the darkness she lived in, but because of it. Beside her padded the quiet steps of Ranger. His muzzle had grayed, and his gait had slowed, but the light in his eyes hadn't dimmed. He walked like a sentinel still on duty, his presence steady, grounded, irreplaceable. As they neared the end of the tour, one of the younger boys, a freckled redhead with big eyes, pointed toward Ranger. "Is that the dog from the story?" Elise turned toward the voice, smiling. Before she could answer, Logan stepped forward. His voice was soft but carried the weight of everything behind it. "He didn't just survive the fight," Logan said. "He showed us how to live again." The boy's eyes widened, and he looked down at Ranger with a mixture of awe and something else, something sacred. Ranger simply blinked, then sat down beside Elise, his tail brushing against her boots. Inside the old radio room, now converted into a small memorial gallery, a radio crackled to life. The voice that came through was gentle, familiar to the town. It belonged to Mayor Foster now, running a weekly Voices of Hope program for the local broadcast. Her words drifted through the hallway. "Tonight, we honor a dog who didn't bark for food, but barked for a child who couldn't see, and a man who couldn't forgive himself." The children stood still. Even the youngest ones seemed to understand that something important had happened in this place. Not just a rescue, not just a fight, but a healing, a return, a kind of redemption no courtroom could grant. Elise knelt beside Ranger and placed her hand on his chest. She smiled as she felt the slow, steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the gravel path and painting the yard in golden hues. Logan took a slow breath and looked out towards the trees swaying gently in the breeze. He had once believed that justice was something you carried in your gun or your badge. Now he knew better. Justice had 4 paws. It barked when others stayed silent. It guarded not buildings, but broken hearts. As the children filed out toward the bus, Elise stayed behind. She turned toward cage 12 and whispered something only Ranger heard. Then, with one hand on his back and the other holding her cane, she stepped into the light. The camera pulled back slowly, revealing the shelter, the town beyond, and the hills in the distance. Somewhere, a bell rang. Somewhere else, a piano played faintly through an open window. The wind carried the closing line like a prayer. He didn't bark for food, he barked for the forgotten. What's your story with a loyal pet? If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to German Shepherd, a place where courage wears fur and second chances find a home.